listen.
Welcome to Nintendo Voice Chat, episode 362. I'm your host, Per Schneider, and we have a lot of amazing topics to talk about today. So today we will be talking about the Super NES Classic just got announced, Pokémon Go, the latest games that you can play on Switch and 3DS now, and also what it's like to talk to the master himself, Shigeru Miyamoto. So that's coming up in a second. But before that, I want to introduce this amazing panel.
Put down your Switch,
Zach's still not paying attention. The show is on.
Hello.
He's used to hearing the voice, of course, of the wonderful Jose Otero, who has left us.
He's back there.
He's still alive, but he's still with us in the back.
Did you make him a ghost?
It's Ghost Jose.
And are you the
black
left
and white.
hand of Link Together?
I'm the right hand.
He's the right
So
hand.
you guys are in the wrong positions, but
Yeah.
the right positions for the audience.
That's right. So why don't we introduce the panel? I'm Per Schneider. This is Zach Ryan.
President accounted for.
We've got Brian Altano. And we've got, from the 70s, Sam Claiborne.
Sam the Sham.
What's up,
Claiborne.
everybody?
And
I love Sam the Sham.
we won't have Sam on for the entire episode because we have so many awesome topics to cover. But we really want. Yeah, we have the best topics are coming up in the second half. But we have a very big topic, and Sam is a great. You're a classic gamer. You love the Super NES, so we wanted you to be on for it. Mm-hmm. But before we get that, I just wanted to catch up on a couple of news items. Would love to do this every week. Just kind of hear about what's happening in the world of Nintendo Switch. We'll talk about some 3DS stuff as well. So first of all, Ever Oasis snuck out. We haven't talked about that on the show at all.
Yeah, Brandon reviewed it. I did the edit on that review. He loves that game.
Yeah, he really does.
I haven't met anybody who doesn't love that game. So I'm going to play a ton of it over the weekend. Have you started yet?
No, I haven't started yet, but I just sort of rekindled my connection with my 3DS yesterday.
I was going to ask if anybody's gone back to the 3DS now that the Switch is out.
Yeah.
So I've barely touched my 3DS since
It looks
Switch.
dim.
It's a different experience, but Fire Emblem right now is only on the 3DS. So I did just fly to LA the other day, and I only brought my 3DS and not my Switch, just because I got to finish Fire.
But you didn't play Ever Oasis.
I didn't, because I still have Fire Emblem.
There's also a new River City game that just launched on 3DS, so I have a couple reasons to go back to it.
Nice.
So speaking of which, Goner, by the time you watch this, Goner is going to be out on the eShop for Switch.
Yep, just launched today. It's $10. I'm playing it now. It's incredibly difficult. It's sort of like a nightmare version of Super Mario Brothers in that it's a platformer with some projectile stuff, but it's also very
So like
roguelike.
Sonic the Hedgehog?
No.
It's
Definitely not.
but I really love the sound design in that game. It's got this weird soundtrack. It actually got an award for it as well. So that's out, and it's pretty cheap, right? It's like
it's only $10. It's really cool. Give it a look. Look at the art direction and see if you're into it. I would say watch some videos. It pushes back a lot. Like it's a very, very difficult game, but it's about score runs. And every time you die, you start over, and you can pick new stuff to sort of re-equip yourself with. And very Binding of Isaac-y. You can kind of unlock more and more stuff overall as
Like a roguelike?
kind of, yeah.
So when you say that you're dodging a lot of projectiles, is it like a shmup?
Well, no,
it feels a little bit like Defender to me, but
Yeah.
it's with it's character based, not
Well,
spaceship.
you know what they say.
Like
If you
Super
play
Meat
Defender,
Boy. Yeah.
rock them into hyperspace.
that's true.
Couple of more news items. So Zelda's first DLC, the Master Trial, is going to be out by the time that you watch this, and we'll be all playing it over the weekend.
hyped for that little line.
Hopefully you're watching our live stream on that as well on this here Friday. We'll talk a lot about that next week. ACA, Neo Geo Magical Drop 2. I love Japanese game titles. They just roll off the tongue. Came out for the Switch. It's just the classic Neo Geo puzzle game. You ever played it?
Oh yeah, it's really cool.
It's Bust a Move, basically.
Yeah, it's basically
right?
Bust a Move with weird anime characters in the background. It's all sprite based. If you've been
We have that
following,
arcade cabinet in our kitchen.
oh, do we really? Cool.
It's a magical drop.
Come on down to IGN and come play that over here. And then, if you're following the ACA releases, they've been really steady since the Switch launched with a new game every week. In lieu of the fact that we're not actually getting any virtual console stuff, but this one's cool. Like the rest, they're $8, and it's just a cool puzzle game if you need another one of those.
So we won't talk about these games now, but we'll talk a little bit more about them later. Mighty Gunvolt Burst is out for 3DS. You played a ton of the Switch version. We'll talk about that a little bit later. RPG Maker Fest is out on the 3DS. I mean, it is exactly what you think it is. You build your own RPG
maker on your 3DS. That's pretty impressive.
Awesome.
I saw a guy in the NVC group. I'm sorry, I don't have your name, but he's making sort of like a stereotypical RPG that's just like, hey, we need to give you a bunch of quests so you can learn like the tutorial basics of this game. That's the dialogue he's writing into it.
Yeah.
Like it's very on the nose. I think that's really smart. So yeah, go make some weird creative RPGs.
Too cool. And then Playtonic announced they're testing Yooka-Laylee now on the Switch. So if you held off and didn't get it for any of the other platforms, that's going to be announced. The date is going to be announced soon. And then my favorite announcement this week is that Pac-Man Versus is coming to the Namco Museum collection for Switch.
That was the whole focus of an E3 Nintendo press conference one year.
Yeah.
So
this game.
And it is
Versus?
Yes.
What year?
Probably 2002 or 2003.
That's crazy.
Dark Ages.
So it's we have that infamous connection to that reveal, the reaction guys meme, right? That was the sad picture of us looking all depressed. That was in reaction to Pac-Man Versus. So that first picture was us being genuinely kind of not that excited about the press conference. Honestly, it wasn't taken right at that moment. It was just kind of like summing up our experience. We're just waiting for it to get ready. And then the excited picture was a year later with Twilight Princess. But that was Pac-Man Versus. So we have a lot of feelings about that game.
It's a cool game.
It's actually a good game.
But Shigeru Miyamoto worked on that game with Namco. I think even Toru Iwatani, who designed Pac-Man, like what an amazing pedigree.
That's pretty wild,
behind this game. But it really is just one person controlling the Pac-Man.
Yeah,
it was multiplayer only. Now you can play actually single player versus Pac-Man, right?
Yeah, the story of Miyamoto working on a Pac-Man game for retro gamers is a huge thing, but to sort of like tentpole your E3 press conference, not so much, especially once people found out that you needed like 4 GBAs to play it. Like there was a pretty high barrier for entry there.
So, but let's get to the big news. The biggest news that we all knew it was going to happen.
We hoped it would
We
happen.
hoped it would happen.
We didn't know that it would be this soon.
And then it suddenly happened when none of us were ready for it. Pre-orders at this time are still not up. We're all scared that we're not going to get one. But the Super NES Classic Edition was announced. What's it all about?
So it's basically the sequel to the NES Classic Edition, which you probably have for refreshing
Freudian slip,
sites.
but yeah.
It's $80 this time around. Launches October 7th in Europe and Japan, and the 29th of September here in America.
How come we get it early? Lucky us.
I don't know. Because we get the weird purple one. So
I think it's because it's going to sell out, and then we're pre-ordering for the Japanese release.
Yeah. So same thing as the last time. Sort of a shrunk down version of the classic console. Different design from here to Europe to Japan, and obviously slightly different games in Japan than we got here. But 21 total, 7 of which are third party, which is really cool. I think that's a higher average than we saw in the NES, and also longer controller cables, 5 feet this time. The way they actually,
I am from Europe, and I still don't get the feet thing. I think I'm 5 feet tall, or 3 feet, or
you do.
I do meters.
Meters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that? Is this a foot? So it's like
arm to table?
Yeah.
I have no.
I'd say like 3 feet's probably like this, so 5 feet is like this.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this show on iTunes, he's showing the size.
I'm doing
of a
it
very
with my
large
arms,
fish.
which isn't helpful to you at all, and I apologize.
I think the reality is, if you bought extension cables last time around, those will still apply because most people don't sit 5 feet from.
Are they
the
the same connection?
So it looks like they are. So that's the cool thing, right? And we weren't sure at first because it looks like the ports on the SNES were exactly as like the ones that
the
we saw on
the
the
Originally
4-pin or
wired
5-pin.
in the press release, but I guess that just means non-wireless.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it means there are cables. But we saw
Get
from
extensions and everything. That's great.
we saw from the Japanese design that the actual entire front panel of this SNES pops forward, and you can plug in your stuff there. So the controls are actually the same exact ports as we saw on the Wii for everything you plugged into the bottom of your Wii remote.
The weird clippy ones, right? Yeah.
Which means if you have like the wired classic controllers or pro controllers or whatever they were back in the Wii, you can use those.
That's sweet.
You might be able to use your NES controllers on some games. We'll see. I don't know. I mean, we'll see if that works out. And then obviously 8BitDo and Hyperkin and all the other companies that make third-party controllers will work on there too. So I have a couple of extension cables I got from the last time around, so it's cool to know those will work this time. Remains to be seen if this will get hacked or anything like we saw with the
undoubtedly,
NES.
yeah.
Undoubtedly. But I think one of the big things that you're probably immediately worried about is, will I be able to buy one of these things? The answer is probably not because it's impossible. But they did say that they will make it easier.
So I think it was in maybe April or March when Nintendo made that claim that they were slowing and stopping the production of the NES Classic to shift their focus on production of the Switch and the at the time, sort of unannounced, unofficial Super Nintendo Classic. Like they were shifting their focus to production on that. So hopefully we will see more of these units, and we know that they're producing them through 2017. But if you don't get one between September 29th and Christmas, you might be out of luck, or you might be paying an exorbitant amount of money for a unit that somebody gives you off eBay.
Look, if I wasn't chasing Amiibo, and some helpful NVC listeners and viewers have helped me actually get some that I just couldn't lock down, I would say they're not going to make the mistake twice. But it's gonna be a hot item again, and like
they
the
don't
NES
make
Classic,
the money off the rare system either. Like, the secondhand sellers make it. So what is the point of having it limited?
I have hopes that they're solving it for this one.
I do too, but we also have thousands of listeners listening to this show right now who still can't get a Switch. So we're in a weird spot. But
you guys think that like the audience though is not as wide for this? Like I think it's a better game.
I was going to say, are you kidding me? Look at the lineup.
We'll get to that
seriously
in a second,
though, we'll talk about it. But like the NES is just factually like a more iconic system. Like people have shirts with that controller on it. You never see the Super Nintendo one.
I agree with that.
Make that
it's a
shirt,
system that's
and I'm gonna wear
really
it to the
widely
office.
beloved, and I think we were in competition with a much more general public for that
I agree.
system.
Andrew was telling me, Andrew Goldfarb, friend of the show, he'll be on later, but he was saying that one of the things that he was thinking about when it comes to purchasing the Super Nintendo Classic is that people like his parents were looking for an NES Classic because that's the only system that it was the first, and it was the one that was the most important to them. And so like you're saying, there's a whole market that we're sort of counting out for the Super Nintendo Classic.
But then the scalpers will still care about this.
The scalpers are already going.
Yeah. So like there's a business built up around reselling these now. So that's just working against us too.
Speaking of business, I have some numbers that I've crunched for you guys, just in case you were curious.
He's the smart one.
Yeah.
Glasses.
tips us off.
Yep.
The NES Classic had 30 games to this one's 21. So if you're looking at virtual console prices on previous platforms, these 21 games would cost you, based on the fact that they're $7.99 a piece, these 21 games would cost $167.79 if you're buying them on the virtual console. Compare that to the NES lineup. If you were to buy those games on Virtual Console, that's $149.70.
Interesting.
Greater value.
Thank you. Yeah. And then just because I'm a crazy person and I wanted to find out for the collector market,
you went on eBay.
which I think that these classic systems are specifically targeted for collectors, right?
This one for sure.
Yeah,
as we were just talking about.
You could potentially go out and buy a used SNES, a used additional controller, and all 21 games. But in order to do that, you're going to have to spend $877.78.
Wait,
think about it this way.
Is this fair market price for the used carts?
So the way that I
Some of them are very
I looked at the most readily available used price on Amazon.com. So
Amazon? Okay.
So
that's a little weird.
Yeah, I mean Amazon is a little more expensive, but I feel like it's got a better rating system and there's more options for when you're purchasing used. And I think that the most expensive cart I found was Earthbound at around $160. But then there's other games like Mario Kart that were like pretty cheap.
Well,
if I went to
Mario
my local
RPG is very expensive, and Mana can be expensive too. So yeah, it's not a cheap list.
Why is Mario RPG so expensive?
It came out very late and it didn't sell well.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
And then they just didn't make enough, and they didn't do additional runs. But thank you for that wonderful calculation.
Well, there's one more calculation that Pear actually did.
According to my calculations.
And according to Pear's calculations, the estimated playtime
my
on this
calculation.
is Sam's calculations. There's a lot of calculations happening. Let's get it. Okay. We're looking at probably approximately 530 hours of gameplay across some of these RPGs.
I mean,
and
that's
stuff.
totally like napkin.
You're looking at Final Fantasy
calculation.
3, Super Mario World, Super Mario RPG.
They're all big games.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. I would love to just kind of go over the list of games that we're getting in the US and in Europe. And the machines are the same. I think the European machine is much prettier. I think the Japanese and the European design of the Super NES is
The colored buttons.
It just looks so much better. And I'm definitely going to import a Japanese one, and we'll get to that in a second why. So we got Super Castlevania 4, Super Punch-Out, Kirby's Dream Course, Earthbound, Contra 3, Donkey Kong Country 1, Final Fantasy 3, that is 6 in Japan, right? Great game. F-Zero, Kirby Superstar, Link to the Past, Mega Man X, Secret of Mana, Star Fox 2, And we will get to that one in a second too. Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting.
That's the good one.
The good one,
Yeah.
the faster one, right? Super Ghouls and Ghosts, the hard one.
Yeah, the hardest
Super
game of the
Mario
bunch, for
Kart,
sure.
Super Mario RPG, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, and Yoshi's Island. That is the lineup.
Yeah,
That's an
just those final
insane
3
lineup.
would be an insane.
That's a crazy lineup. Yeah.
That's like the all-star great games. There are of course some of our favorites missing. We'll talk about that. But Japan is actually not getting Super Castlevania, Super Punch-Out, and Kirby's Dream Course.
Or
Earthbound, weird one. They're getting Legend of Mystical Ninja, so Gambare Goemon, the Zelda-like one of the games on the Super NES.
You love that game.
It's so good. Super Formation Soccer, they get Fire Emblem, Mystery of the
That's super
Emblem,
cool.
also an amazing game. And then Panel de Pon, so Tetris Attack.
So
basically.
you were telling us yesterday that the Fire Emblem game that's coming to the Japanese version is actually a double whammy because it also contains the original NES game, right?
Yeah, so
that's cool.
Yeah,
It's like
so
getting Mario
it's-
All-Stars.
It's a full campaign. It was one of my favorite games on the Super NES, bar none. It never made it out here, of course. I played it on the Super Famicom. But when you look at this list, I mean, what's your favorite game out of all these? It's kind of like picking between your favorite
Oh,
children.
that's
I
so
feel
hard.
like.
To say. It's
Yeah,
so
I
hard.
mean, it's easy for me. I mean,
Really?
yeah, for sure. I think it's Final Fantasy VI. I mean, that game changed my life.
really
Made
good.
me
I would
want
not
to
have
play
guessed that
games
would have
again.
been your
Me
Yeah,
neither.
me neither.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I can't believe it's on here. To
Yeah.
have a lead square, RPG from that era on here, and not have the other one, and Chrono Trigger, which is, it's just cool to have one of them. And this is one I would choose anyway. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
I probably Link to the Past right off the top of my head, but I really love Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Like,
No, really?
You love it?
Oh, I love that game. It's incredibly difficult.
good
but
music.
It's gorgeous. The music is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some Super Metroids on here. There's so many good games. I think one of you mentioned Super Mario All Stars. That seems like a weird omission.
Yep.
It's not that weird because we already have Super Mario World, which is, by my account, the best game of all time.
Yeah.
I play it like
So
once
that's your
a year.
favorite on the list?
No.
Oh.
So I was going to let you go next, and then I have a little
Okay, mine
I have a
is
little
super
story
boring.
to
It's A
tell.
Link to the Past. That's my
Nice.
favorite game of all
More
time,
about
tied
that.
with Ocarina of Time. And then, but just like when you say that, and then you look at the list and you go like, but Super Metroid.
I know. Deciding
Mario
between
Kart,
those
like,
two was tough.
There's just so much good stuff on there, and even like the Konami games. I mean, you get an awesome version of Castlevania, great music. They went nuts on the Mode 7 effects with that game. The rotating
It's really
hallways,
funny.
the entire stage that turns while you're hanging from your whip. Even the
It's
whip.
not the most fun Castlevania, but it has really funny Super
So
Nintendo
clever.
pumped up graphics.
Yeah,
I like that you can
So
wiggle
much.
your whip.
Yeah,
Yoshi's Island is the same
You
way.
can just dangle it.
We all
Yeah.
dangled our whips for a long time in that game. What's your favorite game?
So my first system was a PlayStation. That was the first system that I ever got. But fortunately, like towards the end of the PlayStation era, a friend of mine was just getting rid of a bunch of his old games and just gave me his Super Nintendo and a bunch of games. So I went back and fell in love with the Super Nintendo sort of retroactively. And to me, the Super Nintendo is a system that I go back to when I have the opportunity to play those games. And it's like the way that I listen to the Beatles. Like I have a favorite record for a while and then I go back and just rediscover a new one. And so I would say like my favorite game on this list out of all of them is the same as yours, A Link to the Past. But the one I'm most excited to have, on this collection is Yoshi's Island, because I think Yoshi's Island is such an awesome platformer, and it's kind
And
of
this is the definitive version of it. We might have all played it on GBA most recently, or the ports of that, but this version's different.
Right.
It has a much wider angle to see everything in. It has like touch fuzzy, get dizzy works well. It actually morphs, and this is tough emulation too. Like both that and Star Fox are hard.
So
to emulate.
that's what I was gonna say. So Yoshi's Island and Star Fox 2 are, I think, one of only 2 Super Nintendo games that use the second SFX chip.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was 2 chips built, and those games, I believe, I might be wrong on this,
I think
but those games.
Mega Man X3 might too.
Okay. Yeah.
And by the way, there was a theory that we hadn't seen re-releases like Star Fox before because there were some legal wranglings over the FX chip, and that this collection
Or just
clearly
technical
dispels that. It's solved.
Isn't that great?
You know, you're getting not just Star Fox, but you're also getting Star Fox 2. So quickly, games like, what do you think is the worst game on the list? Because it's kind of hard picking
I will
a
say
bad
that
game on this.
this is a much more difficult question to answer than it was on the NES.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
the NES, I would say Ice Climbers immediately.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there was a
Such
couple.
an Ice Climber hater.
Well, there's
does
just.
hate
I mean,
Ice
come on. Like, how many of you went back and actually played that game?
The jumping doesn't work well. It's not very fun.
it's a platform
that
game where
polar
you
bear
can't
has
platform.
sunglasses though.
Yeah, but that's not enough to carry it. It's a weird one, right? So I think that like this time around, if I was to look at this list, the worst game on
It's easy
the
for me.
list.
Super Mario Kart.
What?
Wow.
What?
Yeah, I agree with
It's not
Sam.
a good kart.
Super Mario
It's
Kart
like-
has. I
have
don't
you gone
think Super
back to
Mario
it
Kart has
recently?
aged well.
It's so hard to
really
play.
Tough. It's really fast and it's really hard to play.
Friends, I made a terrible mistake with the show.
And you can
I'm
only
sorry.
choose, you can only play against one other person, and it's split screen, top to bottom. It's just goofy.
I have a really funny story to tell
a great
about Super
battle
Mario
mode.
Kart. If we have time at the end, I'll tell it. But we got a lot of stuff to go.
Well, I don't know if you guys are allowed to speak after this, but
Fair
what's
enough.
your least favorite on it?
Super Mario. No, I want to be able to speak. I'm actually the one I'm least connected to. This is such a good list, but Kirby's Dream Course is the one I've spent the least amount of time with.
Yeah.
So
I love that game.
Yeah, you were telling me immediately.
I think you're gonna
like
like it a lot. It's a good puzzle solving, like weird tactical game where you like have like a Kirby, you need to get to a spot and he can change into all these things and you kind of like knock him around and there's a great physics to
Mini
it.
golf, right?
It's so fun.
So like
Yeah, and it's good.
isometric.
Yeah, and you can play against head-to-head people, and it's a cool isometric like 3D board.
Yeah, I've never played that one either.
Love that
So
game when I was a kid.
I'm with you actually on this one. Like for me, it's between Super Punch Out, and that's just because like Super Punch Out to me isn't as special as the first one.
I agree.
Or Kirby's Dream Course, and just because of the type of game it is, I thought it was just a really clever game for it to star Kirby, and what they did with this, there weren't any games
I
like
think you
that.
guys will like returning to it. It's
Yeah.
really accessible.
But what do you think is missing?
To me, Chrono Trigger. I know
That's
you
the
touched
big
on
one,
it.
I've
right?
done a scientific analysis of what's
So
missing.
yeah, Chrono Trigger,
So-
ActRaiser. I
Yeah.
feel like
Oh,
is
man,
missing.
yeah,
Check
I
this
love
out.
that game.
Turtles in Time.
I took
Sorry.
that. I love Turtles.
Yeah, me too.
I took the list and I ran it up against the list we've already made of top 100 SNES games.
Plug.
So
So Google that. If you Google top
it's super
100
good. We
Super
actually
NES
just
games.
updated it. That list I think was made 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, it's a great list, and we already duked it out for what should be the top games. And I gotta say, out of the first 13 games, only one is missing. And that's Chrono Trigger. The rest are all on our top 100 list in the 13 through 1 positions.
That's pretty awesome.
And then after that, you have the first missing ones you see are Final Fantasy IV, Tetris Attack, which is in the Japanese one, as you mentioned, Donkey Kong Country 2.
Yeah.
And then you have a few more that are on it. And then you're missing ActRaiser, Mario All-Stars. We've mentioned so many of these already.
Yeah.
And then you get to some weird ones. Mario Paint, I wouldn't.
It's hard to replicate now.
Yeah, I was gonna
though,
say like
on a
Mario
Switch.
Paint would be great, but it's like, what are you gonna do? Sell a tiny mouse?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, there's a third party that just launched a new
saw
Super
that
Nintendo
story, yeah.
mouse. It's
Yeah.
so weird.
Yeah.
So
Why?
So just a few more to mention. Magical Quest, the Mickey game.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's a good one.
Any of the Super Star Wars games. We have a couple of those on here. I really like Tetris and Dr. Mario. Mortal Kombat 2, which is, it would be funny if it was included because it's very violent. From the era.
I feel like
And then there's
Dr.
a few
Mario
more.
though would be a repeat, like any.
Yeah, Tetris and
Right.
Dr. Mario is a really cool game where you can play Tetris against somebody playing Dr. Mario.
Yeah.
It's a really clever game. So I could keep going, but my overall point here is that, man, they nailed the top 20 at the very least.
Yeah.
Like, out of the things that we as a staff chose, it basically matches it.
Well, there's no
Right.
real
That's
weird
insane.
non sequiturs like in the NES Classic, like Galaga.
Yeah.
Like that was
That's
a
why I
weird
put an
choice.
arcade
Like,
point in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get that. Galaga and Pac-Man were on there
Yeah,
too, right?
uh-huh.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
felt like those are not great versions of those games,
Honestly, I think the Japanese, the American European selection is just fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
Just having long games like Earthbound and Final Fantasy on there is so cool, and you've got the quick play
hundreds
stuff
of
like
hours.
F-Zero, so damn good. But then in Japan had a ton of games like obviously like Seiken Densetsu 3 that we didn't get here that could have been in there. Goemon 2 is actually vastly superior. It's
That's a
one of the
Legend of
best
Mystical
side
Ninja that
scrollers.
didn't come out here.
Never came out here. They have Live Alive, this amazing Square RPG that never made it out. So
There's 7
there would
different
be more
characters.
choices in Japan that they could
So-
put in there.
I will say it's a little odd, and I think it's awesome that it includes a second controller. But looking at this list, there's really only a handful of multiplayer games, or at least ones that you can play 2 players at the same
Parts,
time.
yeah. it's
Yeah,
the big
that's
one.
true,
But
yeah.
Street Fighter, you can't do Street Fighter without
You can
two
count
players.
Yeah.
Mario World and Donkey Kong Country and stuff like that you can trade off 2 players.
Yeah, that's
Secret of
true.
Mana is actually 3 players, which you can't do, right? With
Use the
there's
mouse
no
for the third one. Is that
multi-tap.
what you
Oh,
use?
yeah.
Multi-tap. Yeah,
That's
what-
weird.
With the Hudson multi-tap, you could play.
wonder if
the
someone
Well,
three-
there's the versus mode in Super Metroid. So
Yeah, that's right.
But awesome list. But there is of course the elephant in the room on that list, and that is like Star Fox 2.
Yeah.
So if you lived in the Super NES age and you said that's funny, I don't remember playing that. That's because of course it never came out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the story with this?
So, and a lot of people are probably saying, I've played that game. That's because it is in ROM packs that you'll get because there's been unfinished versions. Like, officially, they are definitely unfinished versions. This will be a different version.
Yeah, you can actually purchase Super Nintendo carts that have Star Fox 2 on them and play them in your Super Nintendo. Like that's how
weird.
Close. Yeah.
Yeah. So the year was 1995. And there was a winter CES. Can you believe that? And at that winter CES, there was a game, Star Fox 2, and there was a couple other FX chip-based games there, including FX Fighter, which was a really dumb-looking Virtua Fighter knockoff with the FX chip, and then a really amazing game called Comanche, which is a helicopter game with a FX chip handled with Mode 7 a little bit landscape. Look up videos of that. It's
Crazy graphics,
It looks like a low-res Nintendo 64 game.
Yeah.
And therein lies the problem, is that 6 months from then, in July of the next year, the Nintendo 64 was going to come out with Super Mario 64. What an amazing launch game, right? That would change everything that would ever be 3D again. Also, they had to, they also had the Virtual Boy out at the time, which is floundering, which we should mention.
They were very worried about that.
There's a game called Red Alert that looked just like Star Fox on that.
Right.
Yeah.
But so in looking at that and then looking at the FX lineup, no matter where those games were, Nintendo was like, these are just going to look like bad versions of our Nintendo 64 games. Yeah. So according to the official story, Shigeru Miyamoto himself stepped in and said, hey, like we can't do this Star Fox game. We have to put our efforts into these other Nintendo 64 games. Right. And they did. And then Star Fox 64 came out pretty soon, actually, after that. But man, Star Fox 2 is a very different game. You can go from planet to planet in the Lilat system, kind of choose your battles based on where enemies are moving.
Different stories each time, right? Like it's more kind of like randomized the way you go through it.
Yeah, and there's like the chicken walker
mode.
2-player
split screen.
Yeah.
So a lot of things we saw in later games that borrowed from
which
it.
is one of the things that Nintendo loves to do. Like if something doesn't make it into a game, they kind of put that in their back pocket, and then a few years down the road, when they have the technology to implement that, they're like, okay, now we can use that.
The only difference here is, of course, there was, Argonaut worked on these games.
Right.
And like, I can't imagine what it must have been like when you sink your life, like your waking hours into creating a game that you're probably pretty proud of in the end, right? We'll see when we get to play this, like how good it was. Obviously, it runs at 20 frames per second. It's a little hard to play the old 3D games, but if you play Star Fox, there's still a really good game in there. And then to find out at the 11th hour, after this thing had gone through like QA and all that, then to find out it's not coming out, it must have been heartbreaking for that team.
Heartbreaking, and it doesn't happen often.
And then, Dylan Cuthbert, obviously, he was a programmer on that title. He's very gracious about it. He's very close with Nintendo. He's at Q Games now. But like, I saw a quote from Jess San, who was the founder of Argonaut, and he said, they canned it even though it was finished, used much of our code in Star Fox 64 without paying us a penny. And then afterwards, they poached our top 3D programmers. There was definitely some friction with Nintendo.
Right.
Well, Star Fox and that team, the team that worked on Star Fox, headed by the Argonaut team, they made something amazing, and they didn't make it for Super Nintendo originally. They made it for Game Boy. Yeah. They made a 3D polygon-based game called X.
Yeah.
It is remarkable. That never came out here, so that would be cool for a future Game Boy collection or something if we got that. There's a cool remake of that for I think DSi.
Yeah.
But
right, I remember that. I was going to ask because I do remember it coming stateside to one of the DS systems.
Yeah, it's stylized to look like kind of like polygonal in kind of a beautiful way. And I still think Star Fox is beautiful for not having textures. Yeah. But yeah, that team, like, to do that and then accomplish what they did for the other FX chip games and then do Star Fox 2, like, that was not only, a finished game, it was a finished game that was like a technological marvel. And at the time, Nintendo was in this race with Sony right at the end of it, but the console war with Genesis was raging, and Genesis did a couple things. They did a Sega CD, and then they did a 32X. And on those systems, you got games that started to look much better. And what did Nintendo do? They said, we can do this in a cart. We'll sell you a cart for like $60 to $80. You don't have to buy a new system to add onto your system, and it's going to look just as good. So they did Donkey Kong Country with pre-rendered polygons that looked really good. And they put out Star Fox and they said, look at these games alongside Virtua Fighter and Virtua Racer. Like, we can go head to head with you. It's a really interesting warring.
It's a great idea, yeah. But I lived during that age, and I did play Virtua Racing in the arcades, and then I was super excited about having 3D graphics.
Same.
At home, but there was a definite difference. And like with fighting games where the reaction time had to be quicker, like you could tell that the chips just weren't up to it, right? Like that.
Or Virtua Fighter.
There wasn't a future for that with the current hardware, even with the FX chip and all.
Add this into the mix. Nintendo was not only working on the Nintendo 64, but they had these big arcade games at the time, and Killer Instinct was one of those.
Yep.
And like, so if you can think about an FX fighter, like that's a really silly thing to put alongside Killer Instinct.
Right.
Yep. So Dylan Cuthbert, and he's obviously very close with Nintendo, Mr. Miyamoto, great game designer. Look him up if you haven't yet. He seemed very happy about the release. IGN Japan did an interview with him. He called it a fantastic surprise. The team had a launch party, like a belated
There's
launch party
pictures of it. It's really great.
Which
They
is
all
just
went to like a
awesome.
restaurant in Japan. It looked
It's
awesome.
so cool.
I can't
a
imagine.
cool story.
I can't imagine how surprised those guys must have been. I mean, think about how surprised we were to see it on that list, because there was that Game Informer interview from a couple of years ago where Miyamoto, they asked him about Star Fox 2, and he said, well, maybe Star Fox 2 is better left as a memory. And it's one of those things where it's like, there was obviously no real plan to bring this out publicly. So it's kind of shocking that they would do it in a way that is like, oh, also this little system has a game no one has ever played.
Right.
Like, legally.
Well, it's sort of like historically, ultimately, Miyamoto did make the right choice. I mean, until now, because now we're getting it also. But focusing on Star Fox 64, that's the one people remember when they talk about Star Fox.
That's the
it's
one
not
everybody
really the Super Nintendo
wants when they see a new Star Fox game. They're like,
Yeah,
well, I hope it's like Star Fox 64.
Does he say do a barrel roll? Like, yeah, that's the one you remember, And I don't know if that's just because of age or because they talked. I mean, it was possible to talk on Super Nintendo. That's what everyone talked in.
It ran smoothly.
Gabby J.
And
Yay.
it was just a different experience, I think. Like,
Yeah,
it wasn't the beginning of
It's an archaeological cool move.
Yeah,
and it's something
super
that
cool.
Nintendo hasn't done a lot of. And it gives, I think, a lot of people hope that we're going to get Mother 3 as a translated game.
Bring that up,
Right?
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other cool like Japanese games, Mario and Wario, and as you know, aside from the Square Enix games, there's
Hoping for Seiken 3 still, yeah.
yeah, and then Seiken
that
Zetsu
collection,
3, the Mana sequel. Like there's these amazing games that probably got pretty far along in the process of getting localized that, hey,
make it.
if they got this treatment and like we all buy this system, like it's amazing what we could get.
Yeah,
we
it would
kinda
be
have
awesome
a
to
different
have
era.
like the archaeological dig site, like even unfinished projects or something. I
yeah.
haven't seen anybody do that. Like
Yes.
here are the game demos we developed but didn't make it out. Like to make like a loving care package.
Make a
that.
WarioWare of those.
Totally. I mean, and this was different than just like this was different than a game that only came out in Japan. This never came out anywhere. I mean, there's games like Tingle's Balloon Fight and Tetra's Trackers,
Yes.
which are like Zelda games that we never got here. You could import them or you could get them
Tingle's
through-
Rosy Rupee Land.
Yeah, which is another one. Very strange.
So guys, I could talk for hours about the Super NES and this re-release, and honestly, I'm getting real anxiety that it went up for pre-order while we were talking here.
know.
So we're gonna take a little break. We're gonna say goodbye to Sam.
Bye, everybody.
It was
Sam.
awesome
Gonna
having
take
you.
this and go home.
Take your little portable with you, and we'll of course have Sam back. So we'll be right back.
Here we go.
And we're back with NVC, your weekly dose of Nintendo news here from IGN, and a wild Andrew has appeared.
It's actually, I'm just Sam, but I shave my mustache.
Into a full beard?
Yeah.
I don't think you know how shaving works.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrew.
So there's a good reason we have you on, because our next two topics touch on Mr. Miyamoto, but before that, Pokemon Go.
Yes.
I don't think so. My kids are obsessed with Pokemon Go. They still go out and play this, which is great because they actually walk. But I think you're even more obsessed. Like when the update came out, which just happened, like a week ago, week and a half ago.
Last week, yeah.
You were running around like you're starry-eyed. You were grabbing people and walking through San Francisco. What happened?
So they updated and added raids. They added raid battles, and they completely redid gyms. But the big headline there is that there are now these raid battles where when you show up to a gym, you can have up to 20 people, and there's a raid boss that will appear. And what actually appears is an egg and a countdown. So like the game, the reason I'm so excited about this is because the game has essentially, they breathed entirely new life into it. Like if you open the game right now, having not played in whatever 6 months, it's like unrecognizable because now there's all these weird eggs popping up and you'll get these notifications that a raid battle is going to begin. And basically any gym near you, if an egg appears, there will be a countdown timer. And when that hatches, people are already gathered there because they know, okay, in an hour, I'm going to be right there. And up to 20 people at a time can take down a raid boss. And if you beat it, you get premier balls, which are a new kind of ball in the game. And you can
I have to laugh at that. I'm sorry. You can't just look me in the face and say premier balls. And
We are 12 years old.
yes.
They're white and red.
Stop it. As long as they're not blue.
Yeah. Those would be great balls. But no, it's...
Not really.
Oh boy.
but yeah, you can catch him, and it's really cool. It's a really smart system. On top of that, they just redid gyms.
So you've been playing this game since it launched. Like, I don't think you've actually stopped, right?
Didn't you stop? I finally was like, all right, I'm doing it. I'm taking a break. And then they released Gen 2. So I had like maybe 3 weeks where I wasn't.
Where you weren't playing it?
Yeah.
We remember when we were in Europe and he was playing it nonstop.
We were like,
I got
look at
Mr. Mime.
that. Look at that. Look, it's the Eiffel Tower. Look,
He only went to Europe to get Farfetched or something, right?
I went to
And
Japan for
Mr. Mime.
Farfetch'd, and I got Mr. Mime in Europe.
I shot a video of you when you got Mr. Mime, and it was like it sort of like completely exemplified why the hunt for things is sometimes more fun than actually getting it. Like, we're all trying to get that SNES Classic.
Yeah.
Refreshing the site is probably more work than we'll do when it comes to actually playing the game or enjoying it. You got Mr. Mime after walking around Amsterdam for 3 days, and you were like, I got Mr. Mime.
Cool.
And I just put my phone away, and I was like,
Yeah, cool.
now what do I fill the void with?
But so hold on with the raids though. I wanted just to clarify that and I haven't gone back to play it yet, and I will in the next week. But with raids, you're all working together. It doesn't matter what team you're on.
Yeah. And
Then at the end of the raid, what happens to the gym?
Well, so then the gym is held by the team that basically dominated that raid battle. But also you get a bonus if your team controlled that gym when it started and then you play, then you get an extra bonus, maybe extra premier balls or extra items if you win the raid. And you can also lose the raid. Like, you can run out of time, which is really crazy because there's kind of 3 tiers and it has a difficulty level beneath it, or actually I guess 4. And basically a 1-star difficulty, like there's Magikarp gyms and stuff, I can do that raid myself. But if it's like Tyranitar and it's 4 stars, like there's no way I'd be able to take it down without 5 other high-level players. So it's a really fun system.
Cool.
I played Pokemon Go for 3 weeks when it came out last year. Do I get back into it now? Can I get back into it now? Because like the way you're talking about it now sounds to me, it's like analogous to the way people talk about Destiny year 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like Dark Souls.
Yeah,
DLC.
it's like, well, now I've got all these moon chips and I've got all these light levels, and I don't know what that means. Like, is it too late for me if I haven't been playing at all?
Can you have premier balls?
You can definitely have premier balls, and there's always time to get Ace and Moon chips. I think the answer is yes, and I think the reason the answer should be yes is because the secret best part of this, and they won't say it, but the secret best part of this is obviously how they'll roll out legendaries. Because the way it works right now is you go to a gym and there's a semi-rare Pokemon and you can catch it. There's yellow eggs that mean it's a pretty hard boss or a pretty rare Pokemon. And then there's pink eggs that are something a little more common. People found in the game files there are blue raid eggs as well. And those theoretically will have something a little higher tier. I think that's when we're going to start to see Articuno and Moltres and stuff.
So when you're participating in these raids, are there like 15 people just hanging out together? Just
there people out again?
Pokemon?
Yeah, I really am seeing more people because like we live here in San Francisco where there's a ton of activity in this game. And so Casey DeFreitas and I, the day raids went live, we just went out at 2 p.m. on a Thursday or whatever to go do this. And there were 30 people standing at
Holy
that
cow.
gym. Yeah, like
That's awesome.
And
That's so cool.
So that many people are aware of it.
It was at least around here. It was crazy too because that was when you had to be level 30 or higher. So like that was only the really highest level players. Whereas now they've lowered it to level 20 or higher, so it's pretty accessible.
Very cool. Moving on to the next topic. So one thing, the reason why I wanted to have you on is because you had the fortune of interviewing Mr. Miyamoto, one of our favorite game designers of all time at E3. Awesome interview, by the way. If you haven't read it yet, find it on IGN.
Yeah, please read that interview.
And I think that's kind of like the aspirational goal of anyone starting out in games media or entertainment journalism is to meet somebody who's kind of like this maven. And it's like, was this the first time you met him?
No, this was the third.
Jesus. Okay, so you're an old pro, but what's it like when you walk in there?
I mean, that's the thing. It's like you say I'm an old pro. This was I had met him briefly. This was my first time one-on-one, like talking to him and like being in control of that conversation. It's, I don't really get starstruck anymore. Like I've been doing this 6 years. Like I am used to it. I've interviewed plenty of celebrities, of like famous industry people. It is so bizarre being in a room with him, especially at a show like E3, because you're like, if you remove Mario from the map, half of this stuff isn't here.
Right.
More than half.
The
Most
entire
of this stuff isn't here.
entire convention sort of implodes and on. I mean, you look at like his creations and how that like sort of spawned a video game industry in many ways, which created now thousands of jobs and inspired thousands of people to make their own games.
Yeah.
I mean, how many games do we play now that were like, it's kind of like Zelda or it's kind of like Mario. It's got elements of Donkey Kong, this, and this. Well, not so much that one, but
just the concept.
You know what I'm
I mean,
saying?
think about the one-up mushroom.
Yeah.
Like they are like these icons that you can show to anyone in the world, and they go like, "Oh, that one makes you bigger. That one gives you an extra life." Right? That's all.
And you hear that when
there.
you talk to him. Like it's so crazy because like he's so articulate and smart, and he really like. There are some people you ask a question and they immediately fire off an answer. Like they don't really. They have kind of their pure bullet points or whatever it is. He really stops and it's thoughtful, and you get an answer that's really smart. Like one of the things I asked him was when you in the 80s were designing Mario and looked at that character in your head, did you picture Mario now? Like, did you picture what he's become kind of in 3D, or has your vision of the character sort of evolved? And his answer was basically about how like in the 80s, it was 2D tool sets that were so different than what it is now. And he was literally like moving his hands in the way that like it used to be straight lines and now it's rounded. Yep. And it's just like the way he views the world is so unique, and you can see how he comes up with so many like brilliant ideas.
And you see the cartoonist in him too.
Yeah.
Totally,
right?
yeah.
Drew Andrew a picture.
He did. He drew me a Mario Odyssey Mario. It's really cute.
Just like randomly.
Yeah, just in my notebook. It's pretty cool. I have all my stupid interview notes in there, so I had to tear it up.
Isn't he just sort of just an incredibly warm sort of kindred spirit? Like you meet him and like he kind of lights up the room. When that like Jose Otero and I interviewed him in 2015 with Bill Trinan, translating for us, and that was a weird year for Nintendo because he was focusing on what was it, like Project Robot and Star Fox Zero, which was just a prototype at the time that literally looked like a widescreen N64 game, and he played it in front of us. But his smile, his laugh, his stories were just sort of infectious. Like you just couldn't help but like just feel that you were talking to the our industry's Walt Disney, minus the racism.
It doesn't. Yeah, exactly. There's no ego. There's no condescension from him. Like he really like he's so happy to be doing what he's doing, and I think it's really special. I don't know.
Yeah. And I thought, I mean, if you watch the press conferences, if you haven't seen the Ubisoft press conference there, look it up on IGN or on IGN's YouTube channel and just watch the reverence from the audience and the game designers when this man takes the stage. It's like, it's hard to describe what it feels like when you're there, right? Yeah. And I hear you on that kind of being starstruck thing. We meet so many game designers and you see Miyamoto walk through and you kind of just, you get this, like, everybody is like, oh my God, right?
And it's everybody. It's literally everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's crazy because I even, I saw him at the Ubisoft booth together with Yves Guillemot, who runs Ubisoft. And like, even like Yves Guillemot runs a huge company. Like Ubisoft is gigantic, and you could even see like when he came in the room, he was like so respectful and so like very obviously like, oh, like we're so lucky to have this guy here.
Yeah, it's talking about the Ubisoft conference. I think one of the things that really stuck with me, because your interview is mostly about like the future of Mario, where Mario goes post Super Mario Odyssey, and I think one of the things, or how you design a Mario game, how you think about it on that level, and one of the things that struck me is in the Ubisoft conference, there was that quote from him that said, I told them, have Mario do anything else, just don't let him jump. Like, that's my thing. Yeah. And I kind of thought that was anecdotal. Like, I thought that was something that he just said as a goof. But then in your interview, he was just like, I really challenged him to think of Mario in a different way and really do something different. And to me, that's what stuck with me. Was like, oh no, like he does have sole ownership over the way this character is perceived. And like, he talks about in your interview, one of the other things that I really loved is he talks about how he challenges his staff rather than create new characters to teach old characters new tricks, which is something that, you just don't do in this industry, right? Like you're always trying to do the new thing and create something new and make a new franchise. And he's just so backward in that way. Like he's like, I don't want to create a new franchise. I want to teach my old franchise to be new in this way.
And I love, my favorite quote of the whole thing was that he talks about the idea of manga artists would often have a single character that represented the artist himself.
Right.
And that character would appear in everything. And then he related to Alfred Hitchcock, appears in all of his movies and things like that. And he's like, for Mario, like, that's me, and like that's my character, and that represents me. And there are more stories for Mario, and there's more like opportunities for him in the future. I'm like, what a cool way of looking at it. Like he doesn't just see him as like, oh, that's like one of my stable. He sees him as like special.
Yeah, and I think I'm always happy when I see a new franchise that employs like the Mario universe or does something new with it. You know, it's given us games like Mario Kart, obviously. So I'm actually excited about the Rabbids crossover too. But there are a lot of people who also see Nintendo as just kind of iterating on a formula, right? They say like, oh, Nintendo is just Mario, which I think is unfair because we get so many different genres. But I love it when Miyamoto does something new, when we get something like Pikmin, or when Nintendo lets a new team loose and out comes Splatoon.
Or
I would
retro
love
with
to
Metroid
see that
Prime.
more.
Yeah.
So, speaking of games, I think we should talk a little bit about some of the new games that actually came out this week. If you guys are up for it. You talked a little bit about Goner already from Raw Fury, $10 game. Give it a look if you want to compete in leaderboards and you want a game that will kick your ass. I mean, it's
check
very
out some
difficult.
videos. I think the Switch eShop it's pretty bare bones, but it's really fantastic in the way it lets you sort of like tag games you're interested in and put them in a wish list. B, shows you what's coming up, which is kind of low key right now. But C, like there are multiple screens and videos for almost every game on the shop, and you can just go in there and click through with the L or R buttons, and it's just so much quicker than it was in the 3DS or the Wii U or the Wii to actually explore games.
It's also an elegant way to present that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can tell they looked at the Wii U interface and remember how slow it was when it launched. Everything took forever, and this one is snappy and fast.
So we talked about the 3DS the other day or earlier, and I pulled up my 3DS recently because I remembered that there was a Samus Returns trailer on there from E3, and the way that trailer was presented to me on my 3DS, I don't know if you guys have seen it, is on your 3DS top screen, there is a smaller 3DS top screen that is showing that video inside it. Weird. So it's very meta. And then on Switch, you're like, this is what this screenshot will look like when I buy this game. Right. Yep. And I think because it fills the whole screen, there's no janky borders, so it's really cool. So go dig around, find some cool indie stuff.
But it's also so nice that it saves your credit card information now because like as I have been picking stuff up, I'm just like, oh, this is so much faster.
It's a reminder. It's like the Switch really is a reboot, and they're reinventing everything, right? The way the store works, the way the system and friends and friend lists, all that works. And it's like we're at the beginning of what the OS for that system will be like. And I'm really looking forward to all the improvements that we'll see in the future. On the games release side, my favorite release in the last week or so has got to be Cave Story Plus.
Oh, yeah.
So Cave Story, obviously not a new game, right? Created by Pixel. Nicholas publishes it out here. And it's actually, there's a physical release with a box. And they did some
really
cool
nice
stuff.
instruction booklet.
It has like, they always put like extra little tchotchkes into it to make it worth your while. They had a set number of copies actually had a signature in it from Pixel, like as a surprise for people.
The printed insert has, I think there's 25 of them out in the wild that were signed.
That's so cool.
And I went
like
looking for it.
Like they just
I was going to say, I went looking for like a golden ticket and it wasn't there. But what is in there, or at least for, I believe it was a GameStop exclusive in America. But if you want one of these, get them fast because they're going to go quick. Inside mine was a instruction booklet that's almost exactly aped after the original Metroid NES instruction booklet.
Oh, yeah.
It's like big and chunky and gray, and it's got glossy print and full color illustrations and everything. On top of that is a tiny CD that I will never be able to play anywhere because I don't have like an HP desktop computer with the pop-out tray.
It's the mini one, right?
Yeah. Don't put this thing in your car or your PS4, it'll destroy it.
It also has the cutest keychain ever.
Yeah, so the keychains are weird because they're blind bagged. You actually you're not guaranteed to get any specific character. But I think there's 3 or 4 different ones, but you can trade with your friends on eBay or go in the NVC group.
Trade with your friends on eBay.
So trade in the sense of like commerce.
That's what it says on eBay. Trade with your friends. I actually got the main character, which is cool because I love him. He's got his little red hat. I love him so much I can't name him. But he's in there in a little red pouch.
Titular Hero
Cave. And his story. Plus.
So game is $30.
Yeah.
You can download it as well. And I think it's a good download because it's not a huge game, right? It's kind of retro in its style, Super NES looking. And honestly, I mean, closest relative is got to be Metroid, right?
Yeah,
the way it's
so
set up.
It's like a much. I would say it's got less sort of Metroidvania elements in terms of like items walling off specific sections and stuff like that. You do sort of. It's a little bit more level based, but it's incredibly challenging. I will like take them to task a little bit. I think $30 is kind of steep for this
Especially
game.
for a game
Just for
that's
the
come out
age
on
of the
several
game.
Yeah.
platforms.
Well, and it also
at this
didn't
point,
add like it looks better in HD, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It added like time trials and a couple of minor things. I don't think it really like redefined a brand new package.
Yeah, and we've seen full-fledged.
keychain.
Yeah, you get a keychain. We've seen full-fledged remakes of this game on the 3DS. Where actually they did a Polygon remake, but you can buy this thing on Steam for like pretty much half the price of this thing. So it's cheaper out there. I think the digital version should have been a little cheaper. 20 would have been something a little better. That said, this is like one of the greatest indie games of all time. It's made entirely by one person. It's been ported over and over and over throughout the years. It's
Great music too, really
Great
like
story,
catchy
too.
tunes. But it is like it's the platform. It's got platforming, and you got to do some pretty tricky jumps. But you also have a gun, and the more little like Triforce triangles you collect, the more your guns get upgraded. You can switch between missile launcher and gun, and you do get like Metroid-ish items.
And what I
that
like
you can
about
use.
those guns is eventually you level them up to the point where they assist in your platforming. So shooting at the ground bursts you up into the air.
That's so cool.
And you can kind of just like chain above a bunch of enemies, shoot them, and get where you need to go at the same time. So it's really cool.
There's a story too, some quirky characters.
It's really cute. Yeah, I really like this game. Give it a look again. Like this is. Like you probably came out of E3 being like, "Where's the third-party support?" Like you have to dig around and look for indie stuff on Switch because this is really a fantastic indie game machine.
Yep.
It's not really, it's kind of like it's like the Vita with a lot more sort of AAA first-party stuff on it.
Yep.
So I mean, that's pretty much the best of both worlds for handhelds. Yeah, so check that one out.
What do you think? And then Shantae came out.
Yeah,
right? The HD version.
So pretty.
Port of the Wii U game, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. It came out last year. It's on everything. It's
Have you played this one?
Yep. I played. So I played a little bit of it on PS4. I think it's not quite like I like the Shantae games a lot. I like the different forms. I like kind of the actual like sort of movement mechanics in it. And it's not like fully a Metroidvania or anything, but you do like. As you unlock the different forms, you can kind of go back and unlock new areas. Which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of smart in the way it's designed. You're a genie and you transform into different animals that can sort of traverse into different areas.
God, it sounds like the perfect game for you.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love genies and animals and transforming. So that's it.
And it's like art style wise, is a little Rayman-ish looking, right? Like very
looks like a Saturday morning
colorful,
cartoon.
bright,
Yeah.
It's very like
cartoonish.
hand drawn,
Yeah.
but it's so like crisp. It just looks so good.
Looks gorgeous on Switch in handheld mode, and on your TV, it's really good looking.
Yep.
$20.
Yeah, $20. The animal transformations are a little weird because you can level up parts of them. So like halfway through the game, you're like, I'm a monkey, but now I'm a monkey that can shoot across the entire level. There aren't a lot of levels, but they do sort of nudge you to go back to them and collect stuff and find like it'll take you probably a good 10 hours to 100% this game, maybe more. So
And then Mighty Gunvolt Burst also came out.
yeah, Zach and I are both playing that.
Yeah,
You wanna lead
Mighty
on this one?
Gunvolt Burst is sort of this weird mashup between the Gunvolt games that got popular on 3DS and Mighty Number 9, which didn't really get popular anywhere. But I know
Broke
it's
a lot
sad.
of hearts.
But
It
this
did,
is what Mighty Number 9
but-
should have been.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Is like I'm playing this game as Beck. That's Mighty Number 9, and it's easily the best Mega Man game to come out in years.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing. Like it's really fun. It's really difficult, but it also allows for some really cool customization. Like in the same way you were talking about the customization in Cave Story, you can tweak the way each individual gun fires your bullets and stuff. So you can change the way that a bullet ricochets, so you can hit enemies at different angles and stuff. And
It's almost like a debug mode.
Yeah, it's really weird.
It feels like you're cheating.
Yeah.
Like it feels like, so the entire game is supposed to be story-wise, it's kind of like Battle Network. It's a VR simulation.
Yeah.
So you're not actually fighting 8 Mega Man robot masters, but you are.
But you are, yeah.
But you can go into the settings and be like, I want my bullets to go this far. I want to be able to chain 4 air dashes in a row. I want my sub-weapon to be this.
Yeah.
I want my angles of my shots to spread and then go 45 angles or 30 or 90, like whatever
my
you want.
recoil to be set down here, and I
Yeah.
want my like refire rate or my reload rate to be much faster. And then you go in and you play through the level completely differently than you did previously.
And if you're like, this game's too easy, then you make your shot weaker, you make your jump worse, you change everything, and now you have a much harder video video game.
Chances
So,
are you probably won't need to make this game any tougher though. It's pretty tough.
it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Sounds like Inti Crates should work on some Mega Man for.
I think you're absolutely right. I think this is a good pitch for that. It's very odd to be like, you remember in Mighty Number 9, we all got burned by that, or not? Yeah, but we got burned by that game last year, and to see it kind of come back in this form, in the way it should have been from the start, with like really beautiful, chunky pixel graphics. Like I really like this.
I really loved both of the Gunvolt games, and the ability to play through this game as Beck, as dumb as it sounds, like it really fulfills that Mighty Number 9 promise to me.
Yep.
Like, it's like, well, that game wasn't great, but this game is really good, and I can play as that character, and you can also play as Gunvolt.
Yeah, it's cool.
And speaking of Mighty Number 9 promises, still waiting on those physical Kickstarter rewards from 4 years ago.
It's coming out the same day as the anime.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, there are a couple. I've had really good luck with Kickstarters. Like I've done a lot of non-gaming ones and always gotten an awesome item in the end. But like there are the occasional stories like this one where you're waiting for a long time.
Yep.
There was another game, and this one was weird. Oceanhorn came to
Oceanhorn.
the Switch. We briefly mentioned it last week. It's actually an older iOS game.
Yeah, so
it's
I
got
originally
the
beat it
real-
on iPad, which is so weird to see it coming to everything.
Did you use a MiFi controller or anything?
I tried to. I ended up just using touch. Like, it's not
Yeah.
perfect, but
Yeah.
But it was most notorious for, like, people called it a ripoff of Wind Waker.
Wind
It
Waker,
looks
right?
a
Like, it looks a lot
lot
like it.
like Wind Waker.
And it
a little
has
bit
sailing
more, like
and-
the camera is a little more zoomed out. It was notable on iOS back then on your iPad as basically looking like graphically like console quality.
Yeah, I would-
really beautiful game.
I would
right?
say if you're going to compare it to a Zelda game, it actually has more in line with something like Phantom Hourglass or
Yeah.
Spirit
Yep.
Tracks,
Yep.
in that it's kind of top down. It's a little more 3/4 perspective. This was a really logical game to put on consoles and handhelds and portables and phones that didn't have a Zelda game. Switch has the
greatest
best
Zelda game, yeah.
but it also
So-
doesn't have a Zelda game in that style,
That's
right?
true.
Like,
Yeah.
like,
That's
I think
true.
this one is so low effort. Like it's just like the puzzles never really get that hard. It doesn't really have anything close to like the
not
magic. of Zelda.
development wise.
Yeah.
I mean, they put a lot of time into it, right? Like
Sure.
graphics, music, Nobuo Uematsu and
Oh, that's
Kirito.
awesome.
Yeah,
Like they're
it's super
the music's
polished.
great.
It's,
Yeah.
it's very polished, but low effort as far as like it was more of a casual Zelda.
Oh, I mean
game,
low effort
right?
for
Yeah.
the player. Yeah. Like it's a very like tune out and play it on a plane without you. Like you're never gonna need a guide. You're never like I think that's the nice thing about it.
sounds
is
really
like,
cool.
Yeah.
it's actually like a pretty nice portable experience. I haven't played it on Switch yet, but
And I will say that a lot of you who might, like maybe the old school Zelda purists that walked out of Breath of the Wild being like, I liked it, but it was
Too much cooking and climbing.
too much cooking and climbing, a little overwhelming at times. It was just a lot to do. It didn't really have as much focus, sort of, as being something that's kind of like, here's a dungeon, here's a boss. Didn't really have so much of that. It was a lot more, get out there and sandbox. But this game, I think, does that better. It's lacking sort of, I think, in just that really tight Nintendo quality level design.
That final tweak
That
and-
final
yeah.
tweak.
Yep.
The character is, he's just kind of a boy, but he talks like a man. Like
Yeah.
he's like he walks out into an area and he's like, what I thought next was I wouldn't be able to get through this next area without a sword. And you're like, well, that's weird that he talks like that.
Is it like, is he narrating it
I couldn't tell.
retroactively?
It's really
Like,
weird. I couldn't tell.
I think it's trying to go for that like storybook thing of like
Like a-
and then we journeyed into the blah blah
like a
blah.
Bastion sort of thing? Or?
Kind of, yeah.
But you unlock islands kind of like Phantom Hourglass and
And you sail
travel
between them, and
Yep.
it's actually like, I mean, that was the thing. This game, when it came to mobile, it really was like, holy crap! Like someone really put like a huge world in.
Yeah.
I think now you're totally right. Like compared to Breath of the Wild, obviously you're not.
Yeah.
a
Favorite
story.
Go ahead.
It is a more manageable experience, like 10 to 12, 15 hours,
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's a shorter game too, so it's not like it doesn't take that full commitment that a Zelda game takes, which some people might be into
It's
on
actually
the go, right?
it's longer than I thought it would be because it's like I put in 6 hours already and it says that meant like 40%.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, this is going to keep going.
200% it would definitely take a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Zach's favorite story.
Oh no! My favorite story about that game is that Brian was like, called me over to his desk and he's like, "Hey, did you ever play Oceanhorn?" And I said, "No, I did not." And he's like, "It's not very good." And then like a couple of days later, or he did not that it wasn't very good, but he's like, "I played it. It's pretty cool. Like
Yeah.
it's fine." And then a couple of days later, he's like, "Yeah, I've been playing Oceanhorn a lot. It's great." What? All
Well, I
right.
think the difference between I played it on iOS originally.
That's what,
and
that
I
was
know,
where I was going. Does this port make it a better experience?
Yeah. So I think it works way better with actual physical controls. controls. I don't know how you did this.
I
with
can't.
touch
Okay, because I do a lot of weird things. I play
You're
Persona
talking
in
to a man.
Japanese.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're talking to a man that's played Persona 5 like 6 times.
I traveled to Europe to catch a Pokemon.
I mean, I will say that
Blood
like
for punishment.
if you are even remotely interested in this, don't get turned off by the first hour or so, because I think it starts even more generic than you would think.
Right.
But it does open up a little bit more than.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a weird one
I
to
want to give it a
launch.
shot. I love Wind Waker. That's my favorite game of all time.
Yeah, I think you'd like a lot of it. It's a weird one to launch between the launch of Breath of the Wild and the Master DLC that launches today. Like there's a lot of Zelda on the system, but really nothing top down like this. So there it is.
Cool.
So
There's
now
a lot of games.
Yeah, there was so much to talk about. We're not even talking about ARMS. I know you've been
Very
playing
good.
it the
Very
whole time.
good.
That came out 2 weeks ago, and we've been playing it and we talked about it at length before as well. But I think there's a good amount of stuff to play now between these indies, some of the bigger indies, and then obviously ARMS, and more games are around the corner already. This weekend is going to be all Zelda for us. But before we all get out of here and play games, we want to bring back a segment that you guys have been asking for a lot, and that's a question block. So
right.
Brian went through the Facebook group for NVC, so the NVC Forums. If you look for it on Facebook, you can find it. And also our inbox. You can email us anytime at nvc@ign.com with questions. We see everything. We don't answer everything because there are too many of them, but we do want to get better at picking them and reading them here on the show. So take it away,
absolutely.
man.
I just want to say thanks real quick to the NVC Facebook group. You guys are great. I'm trying to be more active in there and throw cool stuff in there all the time. And I got a ton of responses just being like, hey, we're bringing back question blocks. So thank you for being energized and making this something that we really love doing. So we got a question from Alejandro Acosta. He asks, and we talked about this briefly earlier, do you think it's already too late for ukulele on Switch?
No.
No.
I don't think so. I think that personally, like I passed on ukulele on the other consoles because as a spiritual successor to banjo, I want to play it on a Nintendo console.
I totally agree.
And so, and I've heard that sentiment a lot, like not just from you guys, but like talking to people out in the wild, people are saying like, no, like that to me looks and feels like a Nintendo game. I want to play it on a Nintendo console. Also,
weird.
It is
I wanna
weird,
take it on
but I
the
love
go,
it.
man.
Yeah.
So
Like,
that's the reason why I held off. I saw people play it here in the office, and I got to say, I looked at the game. To me, it looked a little barren. You could tell this was not the kind of AAA Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie was a big game, a big production at the time when it was
Big
made.
bear.
This is an indie game. You can tell, but that's not to say that it isn't fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think my thing is like, yes, ideally I do play it in the Go and I do play it in Nintendo system, but honestly, I also I would have played it. There were just so many games, and I think now there's actually a window where it's finally slowing down at least for a couple months.
I saw that
Portable factor is just great.
Yeah,
stuff.
for sure.
I saw when this game launched, it got a lot of reviews in the sort of 6 to high 7s, 8 range, which is good. But then I saw that Playtonic was sort of planning to regularly update it and patch it. And I said to myself, like, oh, the version we get on Switch might be way further along than the ones we saw on other platforms. I 100%ed Snake Pass on Switch, which is another sort of kind of spiritual successor to the Rare Era Collectathon.
It's on sale right now, by the way.
Yeah, $12. You should definitely grab that. It's usually $20. It's really, really fun. And I found myself like playing a game like that I don't think I would have 100%ed on my TV in portable mode while I had a TV show on in the background. And if this is sort of, the empty-ish sandbox that we thought it would be, and it's really just about like collecting stuff, I'm totally down to get everything in this game on my Switch. I think that changes the parameters. And yeah, I would love to one day dig into the psychology of why we wait to play these things on Nintendo platforms, but I'm kind of glad we do. It's strange.
Probably because we're just big Nintendo fans.
Steven Duetsman says, what is the highest price you would pay a scalper for an SNES Classic?
$80.
Let's
Don't
seriously
give them any ideas.
$80.
$80. If I can't get one at cost, I'm not going to buy one.
I didn't even want to import because they briefly went on sale on Amazon UK. I didn't even want to import it there because that already would be shipping costs and then buying a USAC adapter for it. Like, I agree. NES Classic is the same way. Like, I didn't get one until I could get it for $6.
So I tweeted out the cost that I mentioned earlier, the $877 for like buying all the stuff used, and I was really surprised at the amount of people that responded to me saying like, "Don't give the scalpers any ideas." It's like, I'm not trying to do that. Like, this is obviously for collectors. If you're going to spend the money on a collection, like,
They're not taking any ideas. They price it and they see when it will sell, and then they take it down. There are already postings up before the thing is even in anybody's hands. It's just the economy we live in now, where people are, people prey on the uninformed. I would pay $100 plus for this thing. Probably if I couldn't get it. I'm a huge Super Nintendo fan.
I would too.
Also, you got that EVP money.
There we go.
EVP money. Thank
I would
you.
too. Honestly, I have my NES Classic set up underneath my television next to the soundbar. Like it's more to me than just something I'll play and chuck in a drawer.
Yeah.
Like it's actually like it's a weird centerpiece of my entertainment center, and I want that mirrored by the Super Nintendo. And then when they do the N64 and the rest and the Virtual Boy, I want them all.
We sort of mentioned this when we were talking with Sam, but more so than the NES Classic, I think I'll be playing the Super Nintendo Classic because as much as I love that collection of games on the NES, the Super Nintendo, that's my jam.
Yep.
Like that's I love it so much.
It's also an era of where games in that short generation, games develop past the kind of like you can still feel the arcade roots of games where you repeat the same levels, or the cartridge space was so small they had to be economical with repeating tile sets and all that. But these are such full-fledged games. You play Super Metroid, and it's like no area looks like the other one, and it's just like think about Secret of Mana and how much stuff is in there.
And I mean,
this is such a great collection.
I consider Super Nintendo the best console ever made. This also has 3 or 4 of my favorite games of all time in it. Like the idea of like having a small convenient package where I could play Final Fantasy VI and Earthbound and Super Metroid
World
and Link to the
Super
Past,
Metroid,
like, insane.
Well, Steven answered his own question. He says, I managed to get myself an NES Classic because my wife is amazing and found one, but I would have paid $100 or $110. And that was for a $60 system. So he actually outbid the rest of us. You already lost that eBay auction, NVC.
All right.
Finally, Julio Benavides says, now that Metroid is back with a vengeance, what franchise would each of you like to see Ninty bring back from the dead? Personally, I want more Earthbound. Let's just go real quick. I'm going to say Advance Wars.
Yeah, I was going to say Advance Wars too.
That's awesome. You guys know I'm a racing guy. F-Zero, 1080, and
I forgot about
Wave
1080.
Race.
Yeah.
We haven't seen these games refreshed in ages. I would love a new F-Zero, and with the power of the Switch, I would love to see a new Wave Race as well. But man, Advance Wars is just such a good franchise.
Did you play what's it called?
Fast Remix?
RMX?
Yeah. Just not the same for me. Like I like that game. I think it's really nicely done, and it just like that weird mix. And I think we were spoiled by GX. GX was a really hard game, but Sega did an amazing job basically taking what Nintendo created and then just running with that weirdness of the characters.
That's it. You know what?
The feel of it.
That's what Fast RMX was missing. It was missing large men in helmets, wearing tight clothes, standing next to the cars.
I know you.
I think that
you're
would
kind
have
of half joking, but
no, but that would have
it's
changed
true.
everything.
Yeah,
It would have been like, he's it. Samurai Goro's in that car.
Yeah. They made it personal. What about you? Anything you want to bring back?
He stole my answer. It's got to be Earthbound. Like my secret hope is that by putting Star Fox 2 in this, I'm hoping they've now set the precedent that every new classic thing they put out will include an unreleased game. So if we get some kind of weird Game Boy Advance classic thing, I hope that's where they finally debut Mother 3.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So folks, I had a ton of fun talking with you. We got to go in a second. What you got?
I know. You got to sign off. I just want to say one thing.
You did the Columbo thing.
I know. Sorry. Really excited that this is the first show with the new cast.
Yeah.
Like, I really dig it. And I want to say that we're so fortunate to be on this show in a year where Nintendo has released a new console, has a new Zelda game, a new Metroid game, a new Mario game, and a new Star Fox game. Like, is that the first time that's ever happened in Nintendo history that all 5 of those franchises, or all 5 of those things happened?
It's pretty insane. Yeah.
We got a new Star Fox and new Metroid game last year, but that was weird.
Kind of. Yeah.
So guys, thank you for sticking with us. You know, this was our first show, obviously, without Jose. We miss him dearly. We're doing everything we can to fill his giant shoes. If you have any suggestions for us on what you would like to see on the show, we're going to rotate through the 4th guest on the show. We want to stick with 4 people, talk more about kind of like the big news events of the week, and give you plenty of feedback on the things that we've played. So look forward to Zelda next week. NVC is IGN's weekly Nintendo show, but it's not the only weekly show. So if you haven't watched Game Scoop, for example, this week they talked more about the Super NES Classic, a different angle. Were you on this one?
Nope.
Sam was on this one for sure. So you can hear a little bit more from Sam on the Super NES Classic. You weren't on it? No. But you can find this guy on Beyond.
Sam with a beard. So.
And Game Scoop also talked about Metroid. So if you want to hear more from Damon and the crew, please seek that show out. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, on our Nintendo channel. You can also go to IGN and find us on our shows tab. Tune in, leave us a nice comment, and send us lots of feedback at nvc@ign.com. Guys, where can people find you if they want to get more
on
of you?
Twitter, I'm at Zacharias D.
I'm at Agent Bizzle.
I'm Garfep on Twitter, and please do read that Miyamoto interview.
Yeah, read it.
Really good.
Very proud.
I'm Per IGN on Twitter, and we're out. Get the thing.